The envelope was standard business size, cream-colored, with a return address from a law firm in Hartford that I didn't recognize. My brother had been sick-seed on everything related to my mother's estate for the past 4 months. This one had only my name on it. I left it on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened it. Let me back up. My mother, Sylvia, passed in late October after 18 months of pancreatic cancer that moved the way that disease always moves. Faster than the doctors initially suggested, slower than mercy would allow. She was 63. She had built a small but genuinely profitable event planning business in Stamford, Connecticut over 22 years, starting from a folding table in our living room and a Yellow Pages listing when I was in elementary school. By the time I was in high school, she had a proper office, 3 full-time employees, and a client list that included 2 mid-sized corporate accounts and a country club on the Gold Coast that kept her busy from April through November every year. Her name was on the door. Her taste was in every contract. Her business was, in every real sense, her third child. I am 31. My brother Derek is 38. We grew up in the same house in Shelton, about 20 minutes from Stamford, and we are as different as 2 people raised in the same rooms can be. Derek is loud in the way certain men mistake for confidence. He fills space with opinions and expects rooms to rearrange themselves around him. He works in commercial real estate, which suits him. He is very good at telling people what something is worth. I went into healthcare administration. I manage operations for a regional network of outpatient clinics in New Haven, budgets, compliance, staffing, vendor contracts. It is not glamorous work, but I am methodical by nature and I find genuine satisfaction in systems that function the way they're supposed to. My mother used to say I got that from her. Derek used to say it made me boring. Our relationship had always run at a low simmer. Not hostile enough to boil over, but never actually warm. Growing up, he was the one who got the laughs at dinner, who negotiated curfew extensions, who talked my mother into things with a particular easy charm that I simply did not possess and was not particularly interested in developing. I was the one who remembered her doctor's appointments, who noticed when the dishwasher needed repair before it flooded the kitchen, who stayed home the summer after my sophomore year of college because she'd had a minor surgery and I didn't want her recovering alone. He sent a card. After she was diagnosed, I was the one who drove to Stamford every other weekend. I coordinated with her oncologist. I set up her medication management app on her phone and showed her how to use it 3 times until it stuck. I helped her begin transitioning her business to a trusted senior employee, a woman named Patricia who had been with her for 11 years and knew the client relationships as well as anyone. Derek called on Sundays usually. Sometimes he didn't. I want to be fair about this. He has 2 kids. He lives in Phoenix now, which he moved to 6 years ago for a job opportunity that didn't pan out the way he planned, but that he stayed for anyway because his wife's family is there. The distance was real. I don't entirely discount that, but distance is a choice you make over time, accumulated in 100 small decisions, and he had been making it long before he moved to Arizona. When my mother died, Derek flew in for the service and stayed 4 days. He was composed and social and told the same 2 stories about her at the reception that he had clearly rehearsed on the plane. He helped sort through the main floor of the house and was notably less helpful once we got to the office boxes in the garage. He mentioned twice that commercial real estate valuations in Connecticut were currently favorable. I understood what he was circling without needing him to land. My mother's attorney, a careful woman named Ellen Park, who had handled her affairs for over a decade, sent the standard preliminary communications about the estate, the house, the business, a retirement account, some brokerage holdings. She indicated there would be a formal reading and that both Derek and I would be receiving correspondence. What I didn't know until I finally opened that cream envelope on a Sunday morning while my coffee went cold was that there were 2 sets of correspondence, the one Derek received and the one I received. Mine included a letter in my mother's handwriting that Ellen had been instructed to send only to me, only after Sylvia's death, and only if certain conditions in the estate documents were met. I read the letter once quickly, the way you read something when your brain is moving faster than your comprehension. Then I sat down on the floor of my kitchen, not dramatically, just because my legs felt like they needed to not be standing, and I read it again slowly. She started by telling me she loved me in a way that felt specific rather than ceremonial. She mentioned the summer I stayed home after her surgery. She mentioned a particular Saturday 2 years ago when I drove her to a follow-up appointment in the rain, and we stopped for soup afterward at a diner she'd been going to since before I was born, and she said it was one of the better afternoons of her life. I had not known she felt that way about it. I had thought we were just getting soup. Then she told me about Derek. Not stories I didn't know. Stories I half knew in the way you half know things in families that don't discuss themselves directly. She had been loaning Derek money for years. Not gifts, loans, with a clear understanding between them, never formalized, never repaid. Over the course of 8 years, the total was somewhere in the range of $85,000. Emergency after emergency, each one plausible, each one followed by a period of normal communication and then another ask. She had kept records. She had kept all of it. She also told me that Derek had called Ellen Park's office 7 times in the 6 months before she died. Not to ask about probate procedure. To ask, specifically and repeatedly, about the business valuation and whether the estate could be structured to liquidate it quickly. Patricia had mentioned it to my mother, who had then confirmed it through Ellen, who was ethically obligated to be careful but had told my mother enough that she understood what was happening. Her son, while she was dying, was calculating the sale price of her life's work. She wrote that she had not confronted him because she did not want to spend her remaining time in that particular conflict. But she had not been idle either. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. The feeling wasn't grief exactly, or not only grief. It was more like watching a picture you've been looking at your whole life suddenly resolve into something completely different. Same colors, different image. I called Ellen the next morning. She had been expecting my call. She walked me through the estate documents in a way that was thorough and unhurried. My mother had restructured things 14 months before she died, 8 months after her diagnosis. The business had not been left equally. The brokerage accounts had not been split evenly. The house was to be sold and divided, yes, but the rest of the estate reflected something other than a default equal split between 2 children. Derek received the house proceeds, her personal savings account, and a clear accounting of the outstanding loan balance, which had been deducted from his share before any distribution. I received the business fully intact, with a 2-year operational runway built into a separate account my mother had been quietly funding, and a handwritten note to Patricia from my mother, asking her to give me a real chance before forming an opinion. I also received the records. Every loan, every date, every amount, every unreturned call during her final hospitalization. Ellen told me my mother had made one specific legal provision. The estate included a formal debt instrument for the outstanding $85,000, signed years earlier in a notarization my mother had apparently had done privately, that Derek had not known she kept. If he contested the estate, that instrument became immediately collectible with accrued interest. If he accepted, the debt was simply offset against his inheritance and the balance settled quietly. My mother did not do things without an angle either. I had apparently inherited that from her too. Derek called me 3 days after Ellen sent his documents. I was in my car in the parking garage at work eating a granola bar, and his name came up on my phone, and I looked at it for a long time before I answered. He didn't ask how I was. He said hello and then went directly to the point, which I will give him credit for. He said he thought there had been a mistake. He said the business should have been split or sold. He said he wasn't sure I even wanted to run it. He said our mother probably hadn't been thinking clearly in her final year, which was the sentence that moved something in me from sad to cold. I let him finish. Then I told him I had read her letter. I told him I knew about the calls to Ellen's office. I told him I knew about the $85,000. He was quiet for long enough that I could hear road noise in the background, which meant he was also in his car. He said my mother had always favored me. I asked him when, specifically, and to give me an example. He couldn't. He said that wasn't the point. I asked him what the point was. He said the business was worth real money and he deserved his share. I told him he had received his share, minus what he owed. He said that wasn't fair. I said I thought it was very precise, actually. He mentioned a lawyer. I told him that was his choice to make, and that Ellen could walk him through the debt instrument provisions if he wanted to understand what a contested filing would trigger. I said this without heat, which I think surprised him more than anger would have. I had spent 11 years working in compliance. I understood paperwork. I understood provisions. I had finally some use for both. He didn't file. I took a leave of absence from my job in January, 8 weeks after my mother died, to spend time at the business. I didn't know if I was going to keep it or eventually sell it. I told myself I was just going to understand it first. Patricia met me at the office on my first morning with coffee already made. She is 54, direct, and deeply protective of the clients she has spent years cultivating. She did not pretend to be thrilled about the situation. She told me flatly that she had concerns about continuity and that the business had been through enough disruption. I told her I respected that and that I was not there to override her. I was there to learn what I didn't know. She looked at me for a moment in a way that reminded me of how my mother used to assess situations before she decided how to proceed. She said, "Okay, let's start with the April calendar." We started with the April calendar. I will not pretend it was easy. I came in knowing healthcare operations and nothing about event logistics, vendor relationships, catering contracts, or the specific social geography of wealthy Connecticut clients who have been using the same florist for 15 years and will notice immediately if anything changes. There were weeks where I went home exhausted in a way that felt educational rather than defeating. There were clients who had known my mother personally and who looked at me with a kind of careful evaluation that I had to earn my way past slowly, one interaction at a time. But I stayed. I kept showing up. I asked questions that Patricia initially answered with impatience and eventually answered with something closer to collaborative investment. By April, I was handling my own client calls. By June, I had renegotiated 2 vendor contracts in ways that Patricia admitted were better than the previous terms. By July, she had stopped looking at me like a problem she was managing and started looking at me like someone she was building something with. I moved to Stamford in the fall. I found an apartment close enough to the office to walk on good weather days, something my mother used to do when she first started out. I did not move into her house. The house sold in March to a young family from New Jersey, and I stood in the empty kitchen one last time before closing and tried to locate some feeling I could name. What I found was something quieter than I expected, not closure exactly, more like acknowledgement. The house had been many things. Now it would be theirs. Derek and I have not spoken since the parking garage call. I don't know if that's permanent. I have not decided. Some doors stay closed not because of anger, but because there is simply nothing new to say yet, and forcing a conversation before something real has changed is just performance. I'm not interested in the performance of reconciliation. I'm interested in the real thing, if it ever becomes available. My mother's letter lives in the top drawer of her desk, which is now my desk. I didn't frame it. I didn't put it somewhere ceremonial. It's just there, where I can read it if I need to, or leave it alone if I don't. The last line she wrote, after everything else, after the practical matters and the legal structure and the record she left me, was this: "I always knew you'd be the one who stayed." I just didn't know how to tell you what that meant to me while I was still here to say it. I read that line a lot in the first few months. Less now. Not because it matters less, but because I've started to understand it differently. She showed me in the way she moved through the world, in the business she built from a folding table, in the records she kept, and the attorney she trusted, and the provisions she put in place when she knew she was running out of time. She showed me in 100 practical ways that she was paying attention, that she saw what I was doing and why, that none of it disappeared unremarked into ordinary life. Some people love you loudly. They make sure you feel it in real time, in grand gestures, in rooms full of people. My mother loved quietly and precisely, and she made arrangements. I spent a long time wishing she had told me more directly. I think I've stopped wishing that. What she left me wasn't just a business or a letter or a legal protection. It was evidence, A long, careful record of having been seen. That turns out to be enough. More than enough. Sometimes it's the only thing that was ever worth having. Have you ever found out someone loved you not through what they said, but through what they quietly put in place for you, long before you knew you would need it? I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that morning on my kitchen floor. Not in any abstract way, just the plain, unglamorous version of it. The idea that what you do consistently, over years, without applause or acknowledgement, accumulates into something real. And what you take, or try to take without earning it, eventually gets counted too. Derek wasn't a villain in the movie sense. He didn't scheme from a dark room. He just made a series of choices that were always, in the end, about what was easiest for Derek. Borrow money and not return it. Move across the country and call it opportunity. Show up for 4 days and call it grief. Contact the estate attorney 7 times while his mother was dying and call it planning ahead. Each individual thing had an explanation. Stacked together, they told a story he apparently hoped no one was keeping track of. My mother was keeping track. That's the part I keep coming back to. She didn't rage about it. She didn't cut him off or make it a confrontation. She just watched clearly, documented carefully, and built something that would outlast her ability to protect it in person. She trusted that precision was more durable than anger. She was right. I think about the $85,000 a lot, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represents about how long she carried that quietly. Years of absorbing something she shouldn't have had to absorb, without letting it make her bitter or chaotic. That takes a particular kind of strength I'm still trying to understand fully. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just keeps showing up and doing the work. Which is, I realize, also what Patricia did. She showed up every morning to a business her mentor built and kept it running through uncertainty and grief. And then the arrival of a daughter she had no reason to trust yet. She didn't have to give me a real chance. She chose to, because she understood that loyalty to what my mother built was more important than her own discomfort. I learned more from watching Patricia operate in those first 6 months than from anything I read or planned. I also learned something about myself I hadn't fully admitted before. I spent years accepting a lower position in that family dynamic without examining whether it was accurate or just familiar. The quiet one, the useful one, the one who didn't need much. I had made peace with it so thoroughly that I had started to mistake the peace for the truth. My mother's letter, and honestly this whole year, forced me to reconsider what I had written off as simply the way things were. You don't have to be loud to matter. You don't have to demand recognition to deserve it. But you do have to keep showing up, keep doing the work honestly, and trust that the record of your actions is being written, whether or not anyone is telling you they see it. Derek didn't lose because of anything I did. He lost because of what he did, compounded over years, in a dozen small ways that he probably told himself were minor at the time. That is the part worth sitting with. Not the outcome, but the accumulation. The choices that don't feel like choices because they're just habits. The phone calls you don't make. The check you don't return. The person right in front of you that you stop actually seeing. My mother saw me. Quietly, practically, and in full. She left me evidence. I'm trying to be worthy of it.